I'm Lope de Vega, and today I have a story for you. When I was writing my famous play La Dama Boba, the censorship in Spain was high, and the church often persecuted those who went against its strict rules. When I wrote it, I had in mind the story of the marriages of my two friends. They both married people that they were not in love with, in order to avoid the persecution of the time, for these friends of mine were of homosexual origin. I wanted to tell their story, however, I also was aware of how outraged the Catholic Church would be if I made their sexual orientation obvious in the play. That is when I came up with the idea to portray their romantic relationships with the person they married to cover up their love. You see, in reality, Finea was not stupid, as many thought she was. She was simply trying to act ignorant in order to scare away potential suitors. She did not want to marry a man because she was already in love with Clara, her maid. They had been together since childhood, and many thought they were simply inseparable friends. However, they were in fact madly in love with each other. They knew that if anyone was to discover their love, they would have been persecuted by the law and potentially put to death by the church in Spain. Finea knew that since she was the oldest sister, she was expected to marry at some point, but she couldn't bear being with anyone else but Clara. At the same time, my dear friends, who are portrayed by Laurencio and Pedro, were faced with a similar situation. Laurencio was a nobleman who fell in love with Pedro, his manservant. Their relationship was almost an exact parallel to the relationship between Finea and Clara. The difference was Laurencio was down on his cash, and so he had to marry a wealthy woman in order to survive in a noble world. He had gotten word about two beautiful wealthy sisters and traveled to offer his proposal to one of them. Laurencio wanted to find a wife who he could become friends with because he didn't want to be tied to someone that he hated for the rest of his life. At first, Finea's apparent ignorance deterred him from pursuing her, and so he set his attention to Nice, the younger intelligent sister. However, one day he happened to be walking through a dark tunnel in the sister's house to spend time with Pedro, and that is when he saw Finea and Clara share a passionate kiss. Laurencio saw an opportunity for both his relationship with Pedro and the relationship that Finea had with Clara to thrive. He rushed to Pedro at once to tell him the news, and from that point on he would pursue the hand of Finea. Later that evening, he approached Finea and confronted her about what he had witnessed. Finea was frightened and offered anything to keep him silent. He simply said, "I only wish for your hand in marriage, for I too have a secret such as yours." Once he was through explaining his plan to Finea for him to marry her and for Clara to marry Pedro in order to be with the people they loved without judgment, Finea instantly agreed, and she said that they should all meet in the attic in secret in order to further discuss the conditions of their marriages. Nice, who was upset at the rejection of Laurencio, overheard their plan to meet in secret, thinking that her sister was madly in love with Laurencio, and in her anger she went to her father Octavio at once to tell him what she had overheard. And when he discovered Finea, Laurencio, Pedro, and Clara in the attic, he demanded that the men marry the ladies in order to protect their honor. Nice thought she had gotten back at her sister for catching her infidelity, but instead, she only ensured the happiness of her sister. The couples lived together in happiness with their fake marriages. In order to keep appearances, each husband and wife pair had 2 kids. Because of this, no one ever suspected that their marriages were a ruse to disguise their real loves. How I wish they could have been able to be with the people they loved in public, but it was an extremely dangerous time in Spain, and this story was the best scenario that could have occurred at this time. And I hope the society continues to change so that these love stories can be free in the open without danger to the people involved. I'm Lope de Vega, and this was my hot take.